You're listening to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Today I want to talk about something that's often overlooked in tabletop role-playing games, especially as a tool, and that is Session Zero. Now, if you're a dungeon master or you have been playing role-playing games for some time, I'm sure you've heard the term thrown around. Maybe you've run a Session Zero yourself. Maybe you've skipped it because you were eager to dive into the story. But here's the truth. Session Zero isn't just about making characters and filling out backstories. It's actually the group's primary emotional regulation tool. I'm Robert Walker, author of Session Zero, the DMG to writing great campaigns in any system. And this is my show where I teach collaborative storytellers how to have more immersive campaigns using psychology. Now, I know the idea of Session Zero as an emotional regulation tool might sound a little clinical, but think about it. This one session sets the foundation for how your group is going to handle tension, conflict, and how it's going to have fun for the rest of the campaign. And if you skip it, you're essentially running without emotional guardrails or a plan of action. So in this episode, we're going to break down the psychology behind Session Zero, how it functions as an emotional safety net, and specific strategies that you can use to keep your game fun and collaborative and drama-free. As always, I'll be giving some tricks of the trade at the end that you can use to put in practice right away. So let's start with what I call the player contract. Now, this isn't about printing a sheet of paper and having everyone sign in blood like a Faustian pact, though, hey, if that's the vibe of your group, go for it. But instead, it's a conversation about expected behaviors at the table. Simple things like, how do we handle side chatter? Is phone use okay during combat? What happens when two characters disagree? Do we let it escalate, or do we step out of character to handle a situation like that? Psychologically speaking, this is norm setting. Humans rely heavily on social norms to know how to behave in a group. And if you don't establish your norms explicitly, people will import their own rules from past games or groups or friendships or even their workplace culture. And that's where friction can be created. So a clear player contract helps prevent misunderstandings. Instead of someone thinking, why is he or she always on their phone? Why don't they care about the game? You've already agreed as a group that a quick text might be fine as long as it's not disruptive, or maybe you've agreed that phones stay face down until break time. Either way, no resentment builds because those expectations are aligned. One DM trick here is to frame it positively. Don't just list rules like a teacher taking away recess or something. It's how can we make this experience more immersive and fun for everyone? That shift in language can invite buy-in from the rest of the group rather than resistance. So next is the alignment of expectations. And honestly, this might be the single most important part of Session Zero. Are you running a grim, survival-heavy campaign where death lurks around every corner? Or are you running a lighthearted romp full of jokes and shenanigans? Both are great, but if half the group signed up for The Witcher and the other half signed up for Monty Python, you're going to have a conflict before you even roll initiative. From a psychological perspective, this ties into the idea of expectancy theory. Our enjoyment of an experience is shaped by whether it meets or violates our expectations. So if I expect a goofy beer and pretzels night, but instead I'm handed a session about famine and torture and tragedy, I'm not just surprised, I might feel a sense of dissonance that can turn into frustration. So using Session Zero to ask questions like, do you want this campaign to lean more on combat or roleplay? Do you want moral dilemmas, or do you prefer tactical problem solving? Are we okay with character death, or should we use softer fail states? These kind of conversations don't remove surprises, they remove misalignments. The surprises then feel like organic twists in the story where everyone's involved in it. There's not a bait and switch moments that break trust of the group. Now, I know some groups out there think that this idea of having a Session Zero or aligning emotionally isn't a good idea anyways. And if you're an entire group of people that feel that way, then that's fine. If you can establish that ahead of time, that our groups will always ignore session zero, and here's how our games are always going to go. And they're always going to be this gritty or this type of playstyle. That's sort of like a session zero too. You just need to make sure that you have at least that conversation. But I think the most interesting thing that session zero can do is really be this tool of an emotional guardrail. So let's talk about specifically using safety tools that make session zero not just about setup, but an ongoing emotional regulation. So first, you've probably heard me talk about this in other episodes. If you've been listening for a while, it's the X card. It's one of the simplest, most effective tools in this hobby. It's literally just a card with an X on it. Players can tap it or hold it up to instantly pause the scene that's taking place, no explanation required. The table resets, rewinds, or fades to black, and you continue without the uncomfortable content. This works because it bypasses the social anxiety of what if I'm the only one uncomfortable, and it gives players a nonverbal, judgment-free way to regulate their experience. It's sort of like an emotional emergency brake. There's also the check-ins and check-outs. These are just quick mood gauges that start or the end of a session. Like using a 1 to 5 scale is a popular way to do this, where everyone shares how they're feeling. At the end, they can share how they are feeling when they leave the session. The psychology here is basically affect labeling. So naming our emotions and reducing their intensity. When you check in with your players, it just externalizes their mood before diving into roleplay. And by checking that out, they can put closure on an experience they might be having in their regular day-to-day life. And you as a DM will know if for some reason there's something that's bothering them, that maybe you don't want to have a session focused on that specific thing. Or if they want to have a therapeutic, sort of immersive type session where they're using the scenario to help deal with another real life thing, then it might be a good reason to incorporate it. But you, again, have to have that conversation. It's really important, especially on high intensity sessions where there's going to be some heavy emotional beats. Next, let's talk about something that seems really simple, but has a awesome psychological impact, and that's taking breaks. When there are high tension moments, whether it's just an in-character conflict or an out-of-character frustration, one of the best tools a DM can use is a forced intermission. Call it out directly. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to grab some snacks, stretch our legs. We'll pick right back up right where we left off. This works because that separation can literally change our emotional state. The brain moves from flight or fight back into its regulation state. And by the time the players are back down, they've had a chance to reset, and the scene can continue without spiraling. Breaks aren't lost time. They're an investment in the longevity of your table, and that's really important to remember. So let's go ahead and move on to tricks of the trade. Okay, so for tricks of the trade, how you're going to use session zero as an emotional regulation tool, some practical, actionable things you can try at your table. So first, for players, speak your needs early. If you're worried about a theme or a play style, bring it up in session zero instead of mid-campaign. Next, use emotional honesty in character. If your character is upset, show it in your roleplay, but also make sure you're separating that from your real feelings. And third, buy into the group contract. Respect the norms that you have agreed on that keep trust strong and allow you to participate in this particular group of players. For dungeon masters, normalize breaks. Don't wait for players to burn out. Have a process for calling for pauses when the story requires it or when you just need a moment to refocus everybody. Next, revisit expectations during the campaign. Just because you have a session zero doesn't mean you shouldn't take a little 5-minute check-in after a big story arc or before some emotional scenes just to prevent drift or to remind people of the things that you agreed upon during session zero, like maybe you need to make a reminder about the phone rule or whatever it is that you set up. Those sort of check-ins are really important. And then frame safety tools as empowering. Present them as ways to deepen immersion, not as a rule policing fun, right? A person enjoying their time at the table is going to lead to a much better game for everyone than somebody who's uncomfortable at your table. And that's just plain and simple. So if you're one of those dungeon masters who only wants to run nitty gritty hardcore campaigns where death is inevitable and, there's nothing is off the table in terms of story, you're probably going to have a lot of people that come and go from your games because they don't like to play that style. And that's okay, but you could prevent that entire frustration and situation from happening if you just had that conversation ahead of time and the players knew what was expected with them through their contract. So let's recap. Session 0, definitely used it more for than just character creation and backstories. Use it as the emotional contract for the group. Define your behavior and expectations, align your play styles, and set up safety tools to create a foundation where conflict stays where it belongs, in the story, not at your table. So for players, remember to separate your character setbacks from your own disappointments. And DMs, give yourself permission to pause and take breaks. You don't need to be on every second, and for the group as a whole, Session 0 and ongoing check-ins are the proactive boundaries that protect your fun. At the end of the day, D&D is about collective storytelling. Conflict and tension make the story exciting, but the real story is the friendship and the collaboration that happens at the table. So keep the drama to the dice, not to the players. That is all for this week's episode. I love to hear from you if you've had any strategies that have worked really well or tools you've used in Session 0 that work really well. What have you used? Have you had the X card? Have you had other similar tools that have been brought into your campaign? And what worked well and what didn't work? Now, don't forget, please, to subscribe, share, leave a review for the show. If you can get on our Etsy store and support any of our products, or on our Patreon and become a cyclothid, it helps more adventurers find the show, and it really keeps us on the air. So thank you for everybody who does support the show in any way. As always, my friends, we'll see you next session.